Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgiana.
And this is Wholehearted Loving, where we teach you simple tools for self-love and compassion to grow the muscles you need to be with big feelings, triggers, and overwhelming sensations in your body.
Whether you have active challenges in your life or relationships, or whether you're just here to learn to be kinder to yourself, we pull out all the little things that make life feel better, the things that give you a sense of hope and direction.
So if you're too hard on yourself or on others,
if you want to feel real, deep connection in your life and relationships,
even if you want to reprogram your inner critic while you're sleeping,
this is a great place to be.
So welcome, and we hope this episode brings you just the tidbit you needed today.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about when to say no and when to lean in. You can find self-reflection prompts for this episode and every episode on our Instagram at Wholehearted Loving. And you can learn more about us and how you can practice with us live on our website at wholeheartedloving.com. We always have to record this little bit over and over again as I screw up the words and we get silly. And I feel like we're smiling sillily because that just happened, and that's fun for us. Before we get started, we are going to do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
So the topic is when to say no and when to lean in. My body, we just did an episode where we wiggled a lot. And the wiggle energy is still here. And sometimes I might say, follow that wiggle energy, right? Don't shut it down. And then today, though, I'm curious about if we lean into a different direction with the body practice, whether that will feel good, right? Or we will realize, nope, that's not it. It was wiggling. So if you want to play along, here's the practice for today. Just get a sense of sturdiness first, or maybe feel for what is sturdy behind you or what is sturdy underneath you. And we're going to do a little practice here where we use our hands. So you will need 2 hands free. And I'm going to do the thing. And I think Steph is going to be able to better help me describe what I'm doing so that you know what to do. So all the fingers come together on one hand.
You are turning your hand into a bird with a pointy beak.
Great.
Yeah.
And that pointy beak is going into on top of the midline of the skull, the head, about 1 inch from the hairline. I'm just going to let it land there. And then we take the other hand, pointy beak again, make another pointy beak. And so right now we're using all 5 fingers and bringing them to a point. But if you want to use 2 or 3, you don't have to use all 5. I'm using 5. But this other hand goes sort of middle of sternum, like on your chest. And you can be eyes open or eyes closed, whatever feels good to you. And this is an energy practice that I just played with recently this week, and I enjoyed it, so I'm sharing it with you here. What we're going to do is just take some time here and notice when your body might give you the sign that something is shifting, something is slowing down or softening. Or maybe you get a sense of settling, maybe a sense of relaxing. And we're practicing noticing what cues your body gives you when that shift happens. And that shift might have already happened. It might have happened very quickly, or you might need a little bit more time before that shift happens. And if that's the case, that's okay. But once that shift has happened, perhaps letting yourself enjoy it a little bit. So I just noticed a deeper breath. And then we can take that hand that's on the sternum and bring it to about 1 inch under the belly button. Notice how that feels. And see if again you can track and notice when something shifts for you. Shifting in a bit of a pleasant way or neutral way. Just something's beginning to feel a little different. And if there's something enjoyable in that, see if you want to enjoy it for another breath. This time I notice my breath could sort of expand more in the front of my body, my chest and belly. And then just letting the hands rest wherever they want to, move wherever they want to. And then a really special part of this practice is the afterglow. So seeing if there's something that feels pleasant right now that you could enjoy, either because that practice created a type of energy or a shift in your being that feels pleasant, or you're like, thank God it's over. Thank God it's over. And that feels pleasant. Allow yourself to enjoy that.
Neat. Part of why that felt pleasant for me was because I made it mean things, which makes me wonder if you had initial meanings of these movements when you explored this for yourself initially.
I don't think I made meaning. I think I held intention, which was just noticing for a softening. Right. Knowing that this practice might give me access to a softening, but it also might not, and that would be okay. But I'm just here to pay attention and see.
So you just followed your bodies, your hands wanted to make beaks, one of them wanted to go up top.
No, my hands did not want to make beaks. It was just a practice I saw online somewhere. And I'm like, let me try.
Yeah.
I always have this sort of curious mind. I'm like, sure, let me try. Yeah. And then I like to notice how it impacts my body and also not assume it impacts people the same way. That's why I said it's possible you have this afterglow effect that I notice from that practice. But it's also possible you're just happy it's done.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Yeah.
What's neat here, I want to make a parallel with all of this work that we do to regulate our nervous systems. What I've discovered over the course of 10 years is that many of these things that we've learned have physiologically soothing effects are things that I've naturally done without knowing that they're doing something, right? We self-soothe in ways that have scientific backgrounds that we're not aware of. We're just making the movements, right? And so when you started this practice, I'm just copying you, right? I'm doing as I'm told, which is soothing to me because I enjoy that. And it took a different degree of soothing when I started making it mean things, when I started relating the things I know about meridians and metaphysical stuff, that gave it a different level. So this is something that you can employ on purpose, And if you pair it with body wisdom, then it's just double magic, right? So first I'm copying you, which I enjoy. So that's one level of nice thing. And then my body says, switch your hands. My body has a variety of ways now that it tells me to switch my hands that I've come to trust. If it's just a little pain or a strain or feeling to stretch, I'm like, maybe it would feel better if I switched my hands. And yes, so it did. And what I'm making this mean as it happens is, okay, I've got one hand on my crown chakra and I've got one hand. Initially, we started in sort of the belly power center and we moved down to kind of the womb power center area. And so then I'm like, oh, well, that's why, as if why is important in this moment, but it kind of was. This is why it felt better to switch my hands. My left receptive hand on my crown, the receptive crown chakra, the masculine right hand in the power center. And then it was just this, I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and that feels nice. And my body agrees this feels nice. So the meaning is kind of secondary, but enhanced.
Yes. That's what's nice about making something your own. And that's what we always stress when we share these practices with people. Just because something feels good and supportive for me doesn't mean it's going to feel good and supportive for you. And that's not why we're sharing it. We're sharing it so that you have an opportunity to notice what messages your body gives you and to learn to honor those messages, trust those messages, feel them more clearly. And I would encourage you to always make something your own, right? Like for me, when I first learned about this, yeah, there's like meridians involved, there's acupressure points involved. But I'm like, I don't know enough about all that to really speak to it. So I'm just going to take the actual, do this with your hand, place it here, and put another hand over here. And notice how it feels for your body. And if you want to add meaning and imagery and things to make it make more sense, fantastic. If you're like, I just want to try the thing out and see what happens in my body, great. Right? So that's what it's all about, is to take something. These are all just opportunities to explore yourself and get to know yourself. Take it as it helps open the doorway, and then you get to discover the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And incidentally, this is how you're going to start learning for yourself when you might want to lean in or lean out.
Yes. So, a little backstory of why we chose to talk about this topic today. You have had a day in that. What I mean is stuff is going on in your life that's not super easy to be with. And it's not just been today, it's been going on for a couple weeks, I think you said, at least.
Yeah.
I have had a day in a totally different kind of way, in a way that I know, and this is not about comparing one person's pain and whatever to another's, but like the stuff that I run into today is just annoying daily kind of things not sort of working out as you'd hope kind of things, right? It's not on the same realm. It's not in the same category of the things that you're going through that are more emotional things or more personal things, right? So while I'm not comparing it, I'm also differentiating that they're not the same things. What that means is we both came into this recording session with stuff going on, feeling things. And sort of, as much as things were going pretty okay in my life today, there were a few things that were like, are you freaking serious? Like, did this have to happen today? And it just felt like the moment I solved and dealt with one issue, something else happened. And another issue presented that kept me from getting to this recording appointment with you on time. And one of the things was I couldn't even find the piece of equipment that I normally use in order to hold the camera up. And I had this moment that I thought, you know what? Maybe it just isn't meant to happen today. Maybe I need to message Steph and say, it's not supposed to happen. We questioned whether we were going to do this last night because of what was going on in your world. Maybe it just wasn't meant to be today and we should just call it off. And there would have been nothing wrong with that. That could have been a course that we took. And I thought, that feels really rash right now. I could feel the energy of that. I'm like, let's just chill for a moment. Let's just keep getting yourself ready and feel what feels right, And I thought, I'm just going to hop on and we'll see. And what I noticed was it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the thing to do. And when I say right, I don't mean there's a right and a wrong. It just, in my body, didn't feel like the way to go. It felt like, let's just go and record and see what happens. And in my mind, I thought, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is we both are bringing some sort of heavy, messy, scattered energy. Nothing we say makes sense. And we realize this is not really an episode that is helpful to post, which I would even challenge that. I think there's always helpful things, not because we're great or something, but because there's always something to learn from what presents in life. Right. But anyways, I thought worst case scenario, we don't post anything. We don't come out of the session with the thing we would like to come out with. Okay, I can live with that. It's not that big of a deal. And then what happened was we had such a great time. And it was such an episode that felt so fun for me. My body was a big yes, like the whole way through, in a way that was surprising and unexpected. And so when I experienced that as we were wrapping our last episode recording, I was like, you know what? This is important to touch on. Is like, how do we start getting clearer through our body messages, through intuition, through the heart, through the gut, through the mind? When does it serve me more to honor the no? And when does it serve me to lean in and see what could happen, what's possible? And in this case, it didn't feel like calling it off was the thing. Although we could have called it off and everything would have been fine. We would have figured out a time to record an episode and have one ready for Sundays when we post. Yeah, so I wanted to share that, and I wanted to share how it has sometimes been clear for me that no was the answer, was the right answer. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. I just wanted to share this piece first and share that it's not always black and white. Sometimes we think it's black and white. There's these rules. And especially if you've been leaning into personal growth and healing work and learning to change your patterns, you might think, well, if I had an old tendency to always cancel, I should just push through and just say yes. Or if I had an old tendency to like say no all the time, right? And not do the thing whenever the conditions weren't just perfect, I should do the thing, right? Or if I'm always like, let's say yes all the time, it's not okay to say no. I think, oh, I must say no now. I realize I don't really like living that way. It doesn't actually give me more freedom in my life. It just gives me another rigid option. And so in my life, I've been playing around with, am I willing to not make a rash decision? Am I willing to sit with what arises within me, body sensation wise, emotion, thoughts wise, and assess a little bit on what do I want to do here? Do I want to honor a no? Especially because I have a history of not honoring a no? Or do I want to lean in and try anyways and see what could come out of it? So that's the thing. That's what I wanted to share.
I love that. I have a lot to say.
Say
surprise. I've taken notes. What you're describing here is an ability to pause and notice your body and connect with an intention, right? And this is reminding me of a time before where I maybe didn't have a clear intention, like generally in life, in most of my endeavors. And I didn't trust myself. I didn't know my body. I had zero pause and very little chill. And the big question was, is it a sign? What should I do? And everything was a sign of something, which was just a larger sign that I didn't know how to slow down and trust my body and find the answer and connect with intention, right? That's really what the sign was. So I think this is a pretty common thing, right? You looked at all these cues today, and this was a ripe ground for this situation. We were talking yesterday about maybe not, and then all this stuff happened today. And at any point, you could have, so it's a sign that this is a no. And yet, when you check in with your intention, that's when the magic kind of happens, right? Like you've paused That's great. And you've got useful information from your body. That's wonderful. And you've paired it with intention. That's like the trifecta of magic. I would suggest that you could just connect with intention. That won't give you as much information, but it's still directing a stream of energy that's going to have an enormous effect, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this reminds me of my year of yes. I've probably talked about this before, but I had a year when I first started doing real estate. It's like, I'm going to say yes to everything for 1 year. Holy God. I was very, very busy. I made lots and lots of money. And the magic that I found was really, really tied into my intention. So my intention was to say yes. Super clear. There's no question, right? It's nice to have a black and white scenario like that to test this out for yourself. When something came up that I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do this thing I've said yes to. The minute that I reconnect with my intention and go, okay, but I said I'd say yes, that's it. We're doing it. Then I would get a phone call. And this happened like enough times for it to be evidence for me.
Right.
I would get a call like, oh, the thing was canceled. And I'm like, oh, thank God. And I feel deeply that it's because I really was intentional and committed that there was still this lovely wiggle room from the universe. And this is, I think, what you're describing when you're like, well, no, I reconnected with intention. Anything you're with an unattached, it's not like, oh, I intend to record and this has to be amazing. I intend to record and anything might happen and that's okay.
Yes.
And then we end up having this wonderful experience.
Exactly. So, and like, we can even go another layer with intention. Yeah, I intend to record. And like you said, anything goes. We'll just live with whatever happens next and make the next choice. But also there's an intention in this case of intention to connect to possibility of like, it could be possible that it's great. I mean, it feels really far from great right now, but it's possible. And intention is such a neat way to help us guide ourselves. Because hearing you speak about your year, yes, there was also a time where I'm like, my intention is to do the opposite of what I would normally do. And so much changed in my life because I was willing to lean into that discomfort. Right. And there were many opposites to explore. There were many things I used to always say yes to that I was learning to say no to. Many things I was saying no to that I'm learning to say yes to. That was a particular season. And it was so important to honor both of those seasons of learning to lean into the yes, learning to lean into the no. And then it felt like I was graduating or something of let's have the intention be, I want to learn nuance now. I want to learn how my body tells me that, maybe today is really the time to honor the no. Or, maybe today is to lean in and to be open to possibility. And what I want to say is like, I don't think any of these decisions that I was making, there was no absolute right or absolute wrong way to do any of the things. But like what I noticed is I feel like I'm honoring myself more. I'm learning myself more. Right. And I'll give some examples because, I also facilitate some calls for rising women, and I take that role very seriously. And, I really honor people's time, and that all applies to like calls that we do for priming as well as ones that I do for rising women. So that isn't different. All to say, like, these mean something to me. I know that people are taking time out of their day, they're spending their money, wanting to be in this group environment to learn and to grow together and to support each other and to receive support. So I'm taking it seriously. And I will have had some hard stuff happen in life. And I've had my share of hard stuff happen in the last couple of years. And there'll be moments where I'm like, ooh, like, do I need to cancel that call? And the question will pop up in my mind, do I need to cancel the call? My old way of being with things was, of course you can't cancel that call. People are counting on you. Show up for the call. It doesn't matter how crappy you feel. Put on a happy face and do your job and do it well. And I functioned that way for decades, and I did really good at it. However you want to define good, but I felt like, I did good. I did that well. And the idea of saying, I can't do this call, this is happening in my life, I'm not feeling well today, just wasn't even an option. And so there was a time in my life where it was important to learn how to send that text and say, look, I'm really sorry. This is important to me. And also today, I just don't have the capacity for it. Right? Yeah, that was a big learning for me. A big reclamation of my no, of reclamation of I can honor me and not just this feeling of duty and obligation, being responsible. So I practiced that. And then, as life happens, other hard stuff happened. And I'm like, oh, is it time to practice that same thing of honoring, like, this is a no today? And I sat with it. I thought, you know what? I don't think I actually need that break today. Yes, hard stuff is happening. Yes, my capacity is a little bit lower than it typically is. And I actually think not only can I do it, not only can I bring something to contribute today in the state that I'm in, I actually also feel like I want to, and there's a part of me that wants to lean in and show up exactly as I am today. I don't think the answer today is to log off of all the devices and lay in my bed, which I have felt that at other times. And it was so, I was so happy, proud of myself, giddy in this weird way of being able to feel the difference between those two experiences. I was like, oh, I think I'm getting to know myself better. I think I'm starting to understand and hear the messages of my body more clearly. I think I'm feeling more courageous, to honor what's showing up for me in the body messages, right? So now it's not a given that if I've had a hard morning that I'm canceling. And it's also not a given that if I've had a hard morning, I'm just pushing through and doing the thing. I'm allowing myself to be with what's showing up and to make a choice based on all these little pieces of information I have, and to know that no matter what I choose, I will be okay and none of it will be wrong. That's huge for me.
It is.
When I grew up thinking there's only one right way to do things. Never let anybody down.
Yeah. I think that's such a typical way for us to grow up, right? We've learned a set of things from our families and the people that surround us when we're little. And unless somebody's saying, hey, kiddo, this is our way, but there's infinite other ways and none of them are bad or wrong, they're just different. We just grow up naturally thinking this is the way and any other way is bad or wrong because I just don't know it. And I think that's comforting in a way. That's those guardrails we talked about last time. It narrows down the options of what's possible. And I think it can be a bit daunting to know that really there is no right and wrong and everything is nuance, broadly speaking. And so you're describing creating those guardrails for yourself with body sensation, with remembering what you're doing and why you're doing it, noticing how you really feel, how you want to feel, what kind of impact you want to have. Those are such helpful ways to narrow down our perspective in those moments where you described this. I wrote it down. You talked about a rushing energy, making a decision from a rushing energy, right? That's where there's too many options. And I tend to resort to, what should I do? Is it a sign? Some external factor, please narrow down my options for me. And we can do that ourselves by taking this pause and by getting to know our bodies.
Yes. And we spoke about this on the last episode about intention, or was it in this episode? I can't keep track. Lots is going on. But like, I used to only hold the intention of show up and do your job and do it well. That was the only intention. So if that's the only intention, there's only one answer.
Yeah.
Right? I've been adding extra nuggets, extra intentions, which is like, live what, like, and this is not, I've done this for a long time, but maybe not in this context. Live what I teach, right? That's one thing I really find important to do, but I had never done it in that capacity before, which was just show up as you are, even when you're the teacher and facilitator, right? And show people what it's like to honor your capacity. Show people what it's like to know that I have worth and something to bring in, even if I'm not at my best, whatever you call that, even if I'm not at my most resourced, I know that my presence adds value. Right? So I remember getting on that call and I was very upfront with everybody. I'm here today. There's been some hard stuff that's been going on for me. I considered whether I should cancel and reschedule. I sat with myself and I felt that the answer was to show up. And part of that is to be an example for all of us to see that, like, we can show up messy and still hold value. We can show up messy and still feel welcomed, right? And I said, what I do know is that I'm coming here today with capacity to be here with you and your feelings and what's going on in your life and what you need support with. I also know I'm not coming in with the same level of capacity that I typically do. So I want to be clear about that. And I want to ask for grace, and I want to practice being slow as I'm here so I can track where my capacity is at and whether I need to resource before I can support you. And people were so touched by that. Like, wow, like you just gave us permission to show up completely differently in life. And that's what I was hoping, that became my intention. Part of my intention was, I hope that by me showing up in this way today, people get to see that you don't have to be perfect and always at your best in order to be able to do the thing, in order to be able to add value. And so it was really neat to play with that. And what I noticed was being in that space actually was so energizing and supportive for all of us. And I got to rewrite an old story that, like, you're only of value when you can be at your peak performance, at your best. And you can never ask for grace from people who are not only expecting you to lead, but like that's actually the role dynamic that you're in. Right. But it was so lovely. Like, I could have just shown up and not told people anything, and I'm sure it would have been fine and great. But there was something in me that felt like it was important to tell people what was going on, and especially important to say, I'm practicing today to give myself grace and time and slowness, and I would like to ask you for the same for me.
Yeah.
And it changed a lot of things for me, that experience of knowing that by nature of just being human, you're entitled to need things. And it doesn't matter. Maybe doesn't matter is not the right words. Like, sometimes we get so caught up in what our role is with someone that we think that, it's not okay for me to ask for that. It's not okay for me to show up that way. Right. And I would like us just to erase that belief.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're all human. Like, it doesn't matter what role. Like, yes, it matters to me that we're kind and considerate when we can be, and in integrity. But like for me to say like, because I'm meant to facilitate this conversation and lead and support here, I can't be human. Like that's really messed up.
Well,
And
I mean,
I lived that way for a long time.
and it makes sense, right? I think there's a huge amount of like, I'm going to call it cross contamination going on right now when it comes to showing up, doing the job, being of value. We like forget about the context. We forget what it means. Like you're describing being of service. And the question is like, can I be of service to people right now? Or am I of better service to others if I withdraw and take some time for myself, right? I think that this language is coming into the culture, right? We know we're like, we want to be valued. We want to show up as we are and be appreciated and understood. What this is making me think of is a documentary called American Factory, where
I thought you were going to say what this is making me think of is 90 Day Fiance.
No. We're into the land of documentaries. I guess 90 Day Fiance is also sort of a documentary. But my point is that there's a factory, right? So what you're making me think of is like widgets. People can't show up at their widget factory job and be like, I don't have the capacity today to make my 900 widgets. Can you still value my presence here today? You know, I think there's like cross contamination with that, where we're showing up in contexts where our value is in what we can produce in a specific time frame, and that's all that exists. And maybe we're not applying that in other areas of life, like interpersonal work, relationships, places where, like in this context you're describing, you're leading these groups with people and they're about life and how you show up and how you bring your emotions and your thoughts. And it's a clear and obviously reasonable space to model that in ways that people haven't experienced. But how do we bring that into our lives personally? In what areas of life? Where might it be uncalibrated? Like when I'm seeing these people in American Factory being like, yeah, I can only produce like 3 windshields. You can produce 80, but see my value. And they're like, sorry, I don't, you're fired. And I hope the woman who said that applies that in her personal life as well, you know?
Yeah. It's really neat to get to play with what you give yourself permission to say yes to and no to, whether you give yourself time to sit with what's showing up, to make a more, I'm going to say, more informed choice about what's best, what the next step is. Because as I hear myself saying that and I look back to an older version of me, I'm like, there was no sitting with. There was no noticing what's going on in my mind, my heart, my body. There was no assessment of capacity. There was no intention of the only intention that drove me was perform, because if you perform, you will be loved and accepted and appreciated. Right. Rigid. So very rigid. None of these other options existed. So,
I think it's worthwhile talking about that. You mentioned right and wrong, black and white, lack of nuance, and like how you and I got to this place of noticing all this nuance and information in our body. At least for me, and I think for you as well, it had to start with that pendulum of yes and no and rigidity before it could soften into what it has become. So it was really helpful to start with, oh, well, if I say no to everything, then I'm going to say yes to everything. Or, if I always lean in, then I'm going to lean out and see how that feels. It's just gathering data.
We talked about that often with the language of practice the opposite. What is the opposite thing, whether it's big or small? And there's a lot of value in practicing opposite patterns and seeing that you don't die, and seeing that the opposite pattern actually has a large spectrum, right? If you can't do the complete opposite, there's still things that are a bit different than what we would typically do. And I think that practice actually completely transformed our lives. And after you practice the opposite, and maybe it doesn't have to be after, but that's one big component of freeing ourselves from rigidity, is playing in like nuance, in like, well, what about the in between? How do I feel that, right? Like when we're just playing with extremes and opposites, yeah, sometimes we need that in the beginning, because I'm like, I don't know what the, like, how do I change my pattern of not just being a people pleaser? That seems really vague. Well, if you give me the task of, we'll just start saying no. Okay. But then I also realized, and like, I think a lot of us went through this. Some of us, you know, who were people pleasers started practicing saying no and being with the discomfort in the body of saying no, to the point where at some point it turned into this, I feel really empowered saying no. And then like behind the scenes, we'd all be like, oh, she's going through that phase. It's okay.
Yeah, she's new to boundaries. It's the terrible twos of adulthood.
Because it's so fiery and it's so like, you know, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to say no now. You can't make me, right? Like I have a voice, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what we noticed, I think we saw this in every one of us, in our peers who were working and practicing this. We see this in the people we work with, is you get to a point, if you're paying attention, that you're like, well, saying no to everything and bringing that amount of fire to everything also isn't super helpful. And so I think I need to find, you know, where that sweet spot is, and also recognizing that the sweet spot isn't one spot. It changes all the time, right? Depending on what's going on. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful process of honing our truth. You know, we start in this rigid place. It has to be one way. All we can conceive of is, well, maybe there's an opposite. I'll go to another rigid place. And then you soften into this, what feels more true? What serves me? What serves my mission? What am I doing and why am I doing it? And how do I facilitate that? And it's generally with nuance and changeability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Just want to see if there's anything else that I wanted. I scribble sometimes when you're talking, and then can I read my writing afterwards? No, I think we covered everything that I wanted to say. That's nice.
That's nice.
Is there anything else you want to say about this before we move into a closing practice?
Let's see. Right. I think just one thing, which is maybe the two pieces I pull out of, I always like to talk about the essence. I think the essence of what we're talking about is giving yourself permission, practicing saying, no, I need to tend to myself today. That brings me over my capacity to say yes to that. And then also noticing when there's spaciousness, even when you're not at your most comfortable or resourced, to say, I think there's a part of me that wants to lean in, and I'm open to the possibility of what shows up.
Yeah.
I think those are two great muscles and skills to possess in life. Yeah. The comfort to lean into either of those sides.
Yeah. Yeah, permission to get it wrong. I'm using air quotes.
To open up to possibility, like the possibility that maybe it's going to be the crappiest episode we ever record, or it's going to be a wonderful episode, and we just wouldn't have known the answer to that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? But we were okay with seeing how things unfold.
You got to do the thing to find out. Yeah. There is actually something else I want to say. You know, when you have an intuition, like, I know that I shouldn't go to this thing or do this whatever, and then for whatever reasons that make sense, you do it anyway, and then something goes wrong. You're like, I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have this or that or the other thing. Why didn't I listen to myself? I can imagine people tuning into this episode and hearing that we're going to talk about when to lean in, when to lean out, when to say no, when to lean in, and looking for a nice, tidy answer to that.
Sorry.
Yeah, you lean in on Tuesdays, lean out at 12:53 a.m. on a Sunday, June the 12th. There's no, it's a process, and it's a discovery, and there is no really getting it wrong on the way to finding out what's true for you. It's trial and data, and letting that be okay. Noticing the whispers, noticing the rushing, learning how to be with it and move with what comes next. Focus some intention, remember your purpose, and then do what's next.
I love that. Move with what comes next. What you said reminds me of like signs, when we're like, oh, that was a sign I didn't listen. And there's different options, different places to go once that thought comes into the mind. It can go with, I suck, I'm horrible, see, I did it again, I don't pay attention to the signs, and I should have, and all the shame and the guilt and the should haves. And that's just not helpful, right? But if you're like, interesting, I had that sense in the beginning that maybe I needed to say no, and for whatever reason I didn't listen. I think next time I'm going to pause a little longer with that feeling. Not, I think next time I'm going to listen to it for sure and do that thing. Next time I think I'm going to pause a little longer with that feeling and just sit with it. And maybe I'll still decide to do the same thing that I did this time, and that's okay. But it's just a little reminder of, let me just be a little bit more curious, take a little bit more time, right? That feels like a more supportive way to use that information than to go down the shame rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one element of signs that I wanted to speak about, because we can get really hard on ourselves when we think there's signs and we didn't listen to a sign and whatever. The other side of signs is getting so caught up in, is this a sign? Is it a sign? It's really a sign, right? It must be a sign. And getting ourselves in such a tizzy of trying to decide whether it's a sign or not, that we completely dysregulate ourselves. Yeah. And that's also not very supportive or helpful. And today I want to say, the phrase came up in my mind, the thought came up, is this a sign? And I thought to myself, I don't know if it's a sign. What I do know is I don't want to spend 10 minutes wondering about whether it's a sign.
Yes.
What I'd rather do is notice that the no is not super strong. It's just present.
Yeah.
And the open to possibility is also there and feels accessible.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll just go with that and see.
There's something here about personal responsibility and avoidance too, because I can definitely think about times in my past where I haven't wanted, I just want to be rescued. I don't want to have to do the thing. I want to have to make choices. I'd rather look for signs. I don't want to decide. I just want to be told, what to do. And I feel that way often about a great many things, and that's okay. I think it's really important to distinguish between whether you're looking for external signs or whether you're feeling feelings. And I want to share one thing that blew my mind that I learned during my bachelor's. Scrying. Are you familiar with this term?
No.
Scrying. It's a method of fortune telling. It's a great many methods of fortune telling. It's noticing patterns in things in order to predict things, Right. So people scry for water, you'll find dowsers with sticks who are going around looking for water. The stick moves up or down if there's water.
Okay.
But if you just send Joe Schmo out with a stick, it's not magic in the way we think of it. It's not like, oh, the stick magically finds the water. The dowser connects with their body and notices all of these signs, and then they interact with the stick in such a way that they're able to find water. Scrying is the same. There's no magical message in the tea leaves or the whatever it is. The person reading them has connected with themselves enough to notice what's coming up in their body what that's typically a sign of or what the pattern points to. And all of that is because of body noticing, like magic with a capital M.
Yeah, and that's what we're practicing doing with our own bodies.
Yeah.
Is like starting to track, what is the sensation that often comes up when I react from fear? What is the sensation that often comes up when I am feeling open to possibility? Right? What is the sensation that often comes up when my initial feel is a no? And then when I sit with it, I sense there's a yes here in leaning into a growth edge. Right? That's why, like, when I work one-on-one and when you and I facilitate group stuff, probably at the beginning, the first session or something, we'll always say, everything we do here is voluntary. It's just a suggestion. You get to choose whether it's a yes or a no. You have full permission. Nothing's being forced upon you. We want you to use this time and space to learn how to honor your no, especially because for a lot of people, they've never felt permission to honor their no, and they've never felt it was either emotionally or physically safe to honor their no. And then we add in the nuance. And also, we invite you to become curious and to maybe sit with your initial no for a little bit to see if that's a habitual protective pattern showing up, to see if maybe it's a no that's based in fear, which is totally okay. And perhaps that along with that fear is a desire within you to lean towards that growth edge, that there's some place within you that knows, hey, my initial response is a no. It can even be a body response is a no. But I also sense that there's a piece here that knows that if I lean into what's uncomfortable, something bigger could open up for me, right? And ultimately, that's what I want. And you can even get to that point and say, yes, ultimately, that's what I want, and I'm not ready, and it's still a no. But you might notice that you're like, well, ultimately, it's what I want. And in this moment, in today, I feel enough combination of capacity to be with the discomfort and desire to want to shift a pattern that I'm going to lean in and try. Right? So it's not so much of just honor your no, so say no all the time. Honor your no, so say no immediately when you have a body no. Right? There's going to be certain instances in life and death emergencies and where your physical safety or emotional well-being is at stake where, yes, honor that initial no. But for many, luckily, for many situations that we're dealing with in life, it's not a life or death situation. It's not a question of safety. So see if you're willing to be curious about that no and to sit with it for a little bit. And maybe what you realize is no is what needs to be right now. And maybe you realize, maybe it isn't a no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gigi. Do you have a closing practice in mind?
Do I have a closing practice in mind? Yes.
No.
And it has a little bit to do with like what my hand naturally went to do, which was like, it was sort of resting on my fist, if you want to call it that. And it made me look up and it made me think of, I wonder. Right? So the closing practice is, and it can just be a words thing, or it can be just an energy thing, or you can pair it with a body posture, a body movement. What helps you connect to the, I wonder energy, right? The curious energy of, I wonder if this is a no or a yes. I wonder what's possible if I were to try.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
What physical posture makes us connect to that? Or you're wondering if we can notice what physical cues we have that make us curious?
Well, there's different ways. Right now, we're just experimenting with how does curiosity show up for you? Can you connect to some of that energy of wonder energy? And like, can you feel that? Like if I said to you, like, can you tap into curiosity? Maybe you feel something in your body. But for some of us, maybe you feel nothing in your body. That's okay. And that's why I mentioned posture. Like sitting up with my chin rested on my fist, my hand, and looking up puts me in a posture of, wonder. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And we might not all have the same posture for I wonder, but for me, that I can access I wonder a lot more there than I'm staring right at you.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm looking at the floor. When I'm looking at the floor, I'm not really in the energy of, I wonder what's possible. Right? But maybe for you, looking at the floor helps you connect to curiosity. I don't know.
This is really interesting, is that you're generally wildly curious in my view. You're curious about everything. And I'm like, I don't wonder about much. Like if I do wonder, I wonder intensely and, huge diversity of wonders. But mostly, it's if I don't know what's going on, then I wonder.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly
and is that a wonder? Can I ask a question? Is that a wonder that has a heaviness to it? Like, oh shit, I better figure it out. I wonder like what's going to happen. Or is there a lighter energy of, I wonder how that's going to play out?
It's not light. It's not
That's
heavy.
what I mean.
It's like intense but neutral. If that, like, there's not an urgency to know, but when you put me on a path, like I'm running that path, So the same is with wonder. And it definitely, when I started trying this looking around, I get into a wonder energy. And it also works looking at the floor. This is so wild, but in a more practical way. Like I start wondering about like fundamental, mundane, practical matters. And when I look up, it's a lot bigger.
Yes. So even noticing that, right? Like when I look down at the floor, I'm like, I wonder how this flooring fits together. Right? I wonder, hey, like how long the floor is going to last. I don't know. Like, do people replace their floors? Like, that's what I get into that wonder energy. It's there. Yes. But like, if I look out the window at the clouds, I'm like, wonder what the rest of the day brings. I don't know. And there's a lightness to it.
Yeah.
And so I want to encourage us to like notice and play with body postures that might connect you to a sense of wonder. And also here you're sharing nuance. I can wonder about fundamental practical things. I could wonder about things that feel broader and more spacious. You said there's a seriousness and not a heaviness. I would like to propose that it's a great gift to ourselves to practice connecting with a sense of wonder that has lightness to it.
Yeah.
Because I think that is something that helps us navigate the hard things in life a little bit more easily.
Yeah.
It's like, this hard thing is happening today. I wonder how it will unfold. Yeah. Right? I talked about this. I don't know if it was on a podcast episode or not, but I was walking after a hike with a friend one day. And it was at a time in my life where what I was doing with my career wasn't super clear. Like, am I going to leave the nonprofit world and start my own practice? Relationship wise, I think my heart had just been broken and I didn't really know where that part of my life was, how it was going to unfold. And as I was talking to her, I said, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what life brings. We'll see what relationship brings. We'll see what career brings. And what I noticed about that was the we'll see came with a lightness. It came with I have no idea and I wonder, and I'm open to possibility. I'm open to be surprised. Whereas I could say the same words and not know the answer, and it can come with this energy. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see
Doesn't
what
sound like
happens
it's
with
gonna
me
be
and
good.
dating. Right?
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with me and my career. I don't know.
Ooh. Wow.
So both contain wonder, if you want to call it that, like a curiosity and I don't know-ness to it.
Yeah.
But the energy of it is very different.
Yeah, well, one of them's pretty certain, and one of them is wondering.
Well, that's what I mean, right? Like, yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So can we, what I noticed is in my old way of being, I wasn't actually in wonder very often.
Right.
I wasn't in the energy of wonder very often. The words might have said, I wonder, but the energy was not wonder. It was like you said, it's certain. It's certain pretty much it's going to turn out crappy.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks, G. That is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then that's it for this week, huh? That's it. Okay. Thank you guys for joining us again. As always, please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share it with somebody that you care about. See you next time.
Bye.